As always, our conversation will go smoothly. As always, we will start from the very middle, not from the beginning or the end. Again, it all comes down to our intuition. In our view, the world through the prism of Torah. As you know, from the word Gora and Yora, this is a kind of guide to life. That is, the Torah is not a book of the history of the Torah. It is not a philosophical book. Some kind of work of the Torah is life. And here is a person who studies the Torah. He is connected with life. He looks at the entire material world and all the events that surround him, also through this prism. Because no matter how strange it sounds, it means that the human worldview affects the perception of reality by the person himself, and generally affects reality. Now, the word concept has become fashionable. All people look at what is happening in the form of their concepts, which they have built during their lives and in principle. I see nothing wrong with this, and therefore it is from this point of view that we will analyze the thoughts of original sin, and again with a new position. We will look at the adventures of Sasha, that is a snake, and eats a person who looks deeply at. This whole story must be understood that the very origin of Nakhash, that is, a certain creation, was not for nothing. Well, first of all, the strange phenomenon is that the whole creature has a pair, but Nakhash had no such implied. There is no mention of his wife anywhere, and moreover, it is said that this massage caused itself Hava. That is, it turns out that it was her equal. From his point of view, what kind of creation it is that originally wants a different kind. This is probably a creation of some kind. Because any creature loves its mate. A cow would not want to be a wolf or a fox's wife, that is. There must be some connection between these creations. If, as he said before, Hash saw Adam and Hala copulating, and he also wanted her, it means that there was some connection between him and her. God created this creature with a specific purpose, some purpose, and here it is. They say that the purpose we had before was only to help Jav with her household chores. That is, today, people are working on machines that help man. The only job of this machine is to help, no one can. Imagine a car asking a person in general. Maybe you and I will have some kind of discussion about the importance of you or me science fiction films. There are some wars between man and machine, but in principle, if there is no breakdown, this cannot be imagined. And here it is happening, and here thinking deeply, I remembered this topic. The work of Vladimir Albrecht. However, paradoxically, it was perceived. He writes on the topic of jurisprudence and on the topic of how a person persecuted by the system should behave during interrogation by an investigator. That is, his book is called How to Be a Witness. And he, being a dissident, wrote it to help people who were fighting for their rights. It also happened that I remembered this man and his book. This is in SSSR. We have his underground publishing house. This seemed to be in the hands of, I don't know who brought it and how I didn't read it there. We got it along with all the things in Israel. And already as an adult, I read this book in this same samizdat printed on those other books. Photo papers held together with the same cardboard and so on. And I liked his approach. His approach was that an organization called, well, let's say KGB or MVD cannot be fought by illegal means, and he puts forward a very interesting idea there, that if we want to win a fair fight against a stronger opponent, playing by his rules, we cannot. To overthrow legality and its rules, because by doing so we bring ourselves into a situation outside the law. That is, we need to be able to use their weapons, play on their side, and be able to prove them wrong. It's extremely bold, and it's extremely clever, and it's extremely correlated with the Lubayan fish approach. Strangely enough, even in the most difficult years when the previous Rebs were still put in a tapestry. In 1927, Rab said that From the point of view of the Constitution, you can also observe the commandments. Parents can teach their children, Tories can lead them to synagogue, and so on. And many skeptics were talking about what he was talking about, how this man talks about the law during the Red Terror. What laws at all? Why mention it? This is funny. Our Rebbe also talked about this, and in 1980, Rebbe made several speeches in Russian, and again appealed to the Constitution with SSR. That is, not to fight this country with communism, not to go underground. On the contrary, tell everything honestly, the truth, and so on. That's his approach, of course. Reminiscent of King Solomon's approach, as we say, what magnifies King Solomon was that he could explain to a crazy person that he was crazy, usually crazy, considers himself smart people and all the rest of them stupid. That is, it turns out that his approach is very close to me. And then I remembered a system called fruits. He says so, if you want to fill my system, then take this word into your head. The fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then the association took me out. Sphere, I think. And if I looked at the entire problem of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil through the prism that Vladimir Albert came up with through his RAF system, what does this system consist of? Fruit is an abbreviation of 4 words according to P. This is protocol L, this is personal about attitude, and D is admissibility. Now I will try to tell you what that means. Anyway, he says that the witness must be honest and first of all before himself. And he shows by the example of this system how this honesty is. The witness needs to be disclosed. That is, not every person can correctly put himself in such a difficult situation, when he's afraid, when he's nervous, when he's worried about other people he's been summoned about. And here he gives several principles on how such a person, an honest person, can reveal his nature in such a way that to be honest with yourself and accordingly before the law. Now all this must be imposed on the situation with Nakhash and Hawaii. I want to present these thoughts today, but as we know, the state has a certain function. The state, by its idea, protects a private person. The individual protects his private property from the invasion of the enemy, and so on. On the other hand, there is a state. Property is to suppress the personality. This is what we see. A strong state can strongly suppress the personality, and it does not always become the servant of this person. Even in democratic countries, an individual is suppressed by a repressive apparatus. And this applies, of course, primarily to the judicial apparatus and security bodies. Here we, imagining ourselves this duality, we understand that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was also a certain duality. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, like the state, has the property of good. On the one hand, it can turn evil. And this is what the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is. That is, here good and evil are on some scales of knowledge. If the situation is good or evil, it already depends on that person's knowledge from his, in general, in a world, what he will do with this situation, how he will resolve it, how he will look at it. And the same applies to the state. The state is only an instrument in the hands of a moral person or an immoral person. If he is immoral, then indeed the state becomes immoral. It's a weapon in the hands of the person. How does this relate to Nakhash? For example, investigator Hawa is a witness. And the meeting between the witness and the investigator is always a very strange meeting. In his book, he describes the investigator as a very subtle person, like a psychologist. He likes to call the defendant just for a heart-to-heart conversation. Why does he need it? He needs to find out what kind of person this is. An experienced investigator can immediately see through a person, immediately understands who he knows how to deal with. Where does he have strengths? Where does he have weaknesses? And the same thing, the situation happened with Chava and Nakhash, began to talk to her, and here Vladimir Albrecht says that Wasita, he calls this the fruit of P. This is the protocol. When the investigator calls a person, he wants to make sure that he can cope with him, he can cope psychologically, and he calls him for a heart-to-heart conversation. The person relaxes, thinks that in principle the investigator is a decent person, an intellectual, speaks beautifully. He wants to talk, get to know him better, and the first word that the witness must be able to use. This is protocol. Who are you authorized by? Comrade, investigator, do you want to have a heart-to-heart talk with me? Come to me for tea. We will discuss football. We will discuss the latest news. If you invited me to you for a conversation about the investigation of which you are conducting, then let's record all the words. The protocol is one sieve, as soon as. The conversation is specific to the investigator. There is already a limitation of the law. While there is a heart-to-heart conversation, he has no restrictions, nothing is recorded. He can ask questions that the law prohibits him from asking an investigator, and when everything goes under the protocol, he is already in control of himself, because at the same time, he is also a future defendant. He has a boss who may well look at this protocol and declare it illegal, and he himself will become an accused. What is happening to Nakhash is created to help Hava be silent and do what he asks Hava. Is it true that all the fruits in the Garden of Eden cannot be eaten? Rav Mashaushi says, what question such an answer is a stupid question. He also sees that Jeve Adam eat. Garden of Eden, he knows that only the fruits of the tree of knowledge, goodness and knowledge are there. Why is he? Asked the stupid question, Rush answers. He asked this question only to start a conversation. What should Hava should have done Siv P from the word pilaf, she said. And who are you, Comrade Nakhash, authorized to talk to me? Who are you anyway? You must follow my orders. All and that was one mistake. That is, when you talk to a person who is not your equal in rank, you have to make sure that this is really the case. That is, the investigator initially comes to you and tries to build a hierarchy. He asks questions, and how do you respond afterwards? That is, a certain era of hierarchy is created, which, from the point of view of heart-to-heart conversation, is not conditioned by anything. He is not higher than you. He is not obliged to answer questions. The consequences are the same and with. Karava, who is higher in rank, has herself placed herself on a level with Nakhash, talking to him. That is, when a person begins to talk to an animal on the same level, he thereby falls, and we see this throughout and around. In today's world, many people compare themselves to animals. We're just primates, we're just mammals, we are no better than them, and so on. This worldview is not only harmful, it degrades human dignity, and thereby man finally returns. That is, it is a mistake of humanity to put itself on the level of animals. The fact that in Dayalahava, the next moment when the investigator talks to a person, he wants to strangle him spiritually, wants to put him in an uncomfortable situation in order to subsequently manipulate him, that is. He is trying to make the defendant more accurate than the witness under investigation, that is, and the difference is very big. The witness says about whom he himself is clean, he is not involved in anything. He is calm, so to speak, and talks about another person. He saw it, didn't see it, I know, I don't know. Subsequently, this is a completely different matter. It's already worth worrying about. He can be convicted, he can be imprisoned, and so on. This means that the investigator hints under the investigative report that if he does not correctly tell what the investigator wants, he himself can sit behind. I want false testimony, for example, or for covering up for a criminal, not cooperating with the investigation, and so on. That is, there are such hints that are trying to knock the witness off the table. He begins to worry, begins to talk a lot in order to justify himself, wants to show his sincerity to this investigator, and so he starts saying a lot of nonsense, being an honest and a good person, but nevertheless trying to justify himself. He says a lot of redundant information, which is what a professional investigator needs. Once he gets a lot of information, he tries to catch this person giving false testimony. A person can really forget. Sometimes he talks a lot, sometimes contradicts himself in the order of things. This is how people live. Sometimes a person can't agree on something. Then he adds, and then the investigator grabs this thread, trying to prove that he is lying. If we look at the dialogue between Nahasha and Hawaii, we see the same thing happening. Hawa says in Hashu that God did not forbid us. There is the fruit of the tree of all trees, the garden of Edom, and further adds, it's not just a dialogue already going on. She's trying to justify herself in some sense and say that no, God is not so bad. He only forbade us one tree. She lets us eat everything normally. Don't worry, she tells him. God has forbidden us to eat only from this tree and even touch it. What did he say? She said what God didn't forbid. That is, she started talking and said stupid things. She added more. That is, in this case, she just fell for this fishing rod. And this one did not fail to use Nahash, but you can't touch the tree. What he did, he pushed her into the tree. She touched him and did not die. Yeah, so you lie, and punishment has already become the main thing because the person who lied is now in a humiliated position. That is, from the state of equilibrium that Hava set for himself, she became a humiliated position. Before us, he became higher than her, and rightfully she lied. And here, in principle, the following should be applied. The technique that Vladimir Abik cites is L personally, that is, when the investigator talks to the witness about him and not about what he saw and not about what he knows about another person, it is necessary to show in the protactol that such questions are unacceptable. Because I can't testify against myself. It's against the law, that is, if he says whether you were at Takomto and Takomto meetings, where you talked about this and that. If it's a question about me, I can't talk about it because it's a question that concerns me personally. And so a person who basically wants to become a witness and wants to get the truth, he doesn't testify because he doesn't want to tell extra information. We can say about Havihala could cut off the previous conversation and say, what is this? You generally accuse me. Who are you? Why are you accusing me of lying? Yes, I said that the fruits of this tree cannot be eaten. I added, this is my personal matter. That's how I look at these things. Not only will I not eat, but I will not touch it either. What's your business? You accuse me of anything in general. Who are you in general? It's my personal business to touch, not to touch. Even I can and have the right to come up with what moral basis you accuse me of lying. Who are you? The next point that Vladimir Albert mentions talks about attitude. That is, the investigator can ask a question that, in principle, is not always relevant to the case. For example, how was dressed about a certain person, or what the witness's opinion about a certain manuscript. That is, everything that is not related to the case that is mentioned. He advises to mention that the investigator's question, which is written in the protocol, does not have from. Not the case, so the witness refuses to answer him. And that's how he can limit the investigator's ability to use the information that the investigator needs. What does he need it for? The investigator uses even fragments of information in order to show another person in another investigative case all his knowledge. For example, here, a person was dressed in such and such clothes in such and such numbers, and he can impress another person with this knowledge, which is unknown from where it came, and thereby break him psychologically. Well, we know everything anyway. It's useless to lie to you. You won't avoid us. We even know how you were dressed and played these on the piano. Or not. That is, all these details that seem nonsense during interrogation can have a decisive influence on other people. And so, in order for an honest person not to fall into this trap, he advises to limit the investigator's capabilities and not to give any information. And how can this be done legally? By refusing, because this issue is irrelevant. What does it matter how a person was dressed or what? What instrument did he play, or was he in Takomto city or not? And now, there is a parallel with Chava and Nakhash. After Nakhash catches her in a lie, she is psychologically broken. Now he gives the attitude of affairs. What kind of question? Now he suddenly begins to talk to Hawaii, not about the fruit of the tree, of the knowledge of good and evil, otherwise you can eat it or not. He starts talking about God, but why did God forbid you at all? What moral right does God have? Or maybe he's just afraid of competitors. God knows that if you eat this fruit, you will become like him. And so he banned, judging by Albert's system. Stokova should have understood. But what difference? What business is this? Is the attitude relevant to the question asked? God, the Creator, God created me. And Adam, God forbade me. What difference does it make? What reasons does God have for that? In principle, it's a question of Hasha. And his presentation has nothing to do with the case of forbidden fruit or not. But after Nakhash has broken Hava psychologically, he can already continue to break her. He's already manipulating her. He had already raised his hand against the very God he had accused. In general, in such, let's say, pettiness, he does not want people to have the same opportunities. And it's interesting that even on X, I agree that God is still the creator. He agrees with this? Well, he's petty. The next point, principle D, is admissibility from a moral point of view. That is, sometimes the investigator asks questions that are very difficult to answer from a moral point of view. For example, testify against your friend, not a relative, against a relative. For example, a wife is not legally allowed to testify. This will not be accepted. But testimony against a friend is legally allowed, and to prevent this, the investigative witness may refuse to answer this question, saying that from a moral point of view, he can't say anything about his friend because it could damage his relationship. A friend may stop trusting him. He doesn't know what to say about it, but he knows that his friend is innocent. He has the right from the point of view of the law to answer this way, and without evading the answers as a result, and without departing from the law. Hava's fatal mistake was that she still ate this forbidden fruit. That is, she followed Natasha's lead. He managed to break her. And how he convinced her, he said, just one thing at once, you won't die. She heard from God or a friend's opinion from Adam, but this is in principle. She still heard that the one who eats the raft of the tree of knowledge of good and evil will die. Nakhash, he said, you won't die. Why on earth does she believe him? She believes him because she is psychologically broken. She put herself on a par with Nakhash. Then he caught her in L. Then he showed her how ridiculous God was in his prohibition. That is, he undermined the foundations of her faith, and now the moral choice is to eat or not to eat, that she is held by the fear of death, and he says, no, you will not die, just one phrase, and a broken person does not need anything else, and does not need anything else. You can simply put him on the edge of the moral abyss with one phrase without any argumentation. And that's what Albert says, even in the most unfavorable situation. The sanctuary has a moral choice, and he can refuse to testify. So could Havo, yes, she lied, she was broken. Yes, she doesn't understand why God forbade eating this raft, but you still know that it cannot be eaten. This is your moral choice, and she could stop this whole story by saying, I will not go against my Creator, this is unacceptable. From my point of view, yes, you are right, God is such a God like I lied, but still the last step to... Well, she fell, she couldn't do it.